You can be surrounded by people and you can still feel lonely.
In a world where we are so connected, why are we so lonely? I feel like so many of us are disconnected from self that we can't even create genuine, real connections with one another.
You are right. It all starts with the connection to the self.
Human connection specialist Simone Heng is speaking out on intentional living.
We live on demand, right? We watch Netflix on demand. We go on apps and date on demand. We even follow our GPS when we walk, which means those serendipitous, coincidental, intuitive connections, the probability of that happening is reduced a lot.
How we can better relate to one another?
It is absolutely all going back to being human. And our dilemma is reminding a generation that doesn't remember that of how to do that.
And her own desire to connect on a deeper level.
I don't want to spend the rest of my life around people that make me feel more lonely when we're in a global loneliness epidemic. I'm almost on the edge of tears, Courtney. I needed this conversation today.
Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Myers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Myers starts now. Hi, Simone. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. I am so excited to connect with you today, and I think that's how we're going to start our conversation, all about connection, because you've quite literally written the book on it.
I hope so. I mean, there's many other people doing this good work in the world besides me, but I think my point of difference is I make a really ugly topic very pretty and ingestible for people. And so maybe that's why I've gotten a bit of traction and been very much associated with it. And I'm really happy for that. The more people we have in this space shouting it out, the better.
Well, I mean, we are in a space where we're like so connected, yet so disconnected. I mean, right now we are in two different time zones. We are in two different countries. We are in two different worlds. It's morning there. It's evening here, but here we are being able to have this conversation, and we are in a world that is so extremely, extremely connected. Yet we find ourselves, like you talk about, like the title of your book, extremely lonely. And I question whether that's because we are disconnected from ourselves. I feel like so many of us are disconnected from self that we can't even create genuine, real connections with one another.
Yeah, that is actually the subject of my second book, which I finished the first draft of and will be published in 2025, all about self-connection, which I define as the awareness of one's own experience in the world at any given time. And the any given time part is important because, as we know, as human beings, we're highly complex and nuanced, and that experience changes from moment to moment. But the ability to connect to self absolutely changes every decision that you make. And that brings me to the point of, yes, you and I are connecting across time zones, countries, cultures, whatever it may be, geographies. But because we both have a high level of self-connection, we make the decision to use this call to have a conversation with a level of depth, which therefore makes us feel satiated and more connected. Now, if you don't have that self-connection, you may choose to use a video call for a podcast or whatever it is with someone across the other side of the world. You might be on your mobile phone at the same time as doing your podcast. You may be distracted, not giving the person attention. You may not even be mindful enough to use the technology. Right now, Courtney, I'm giving you all the dopamine, the Duchenne smile, the eye contact through the camera so that you receive that down your end as if we're having coffee together. Now, if you have no self-connection, how can you implement any of these things? You're just not even present. You're out of your own body. And I think you are right. It all starts with the connection to the self. And that's something I'm currently obsessed with. So you've kind of read my mind there. I mean, whenever you're writing a book, you're currently obsessed with whatever you're writing at that particular time. So
Isn't that so true? I mean, I am a writer as well. And that is one of the things, I ghostwrite for people. I have my own books. I work with writers. I talk to writers all the time. And I spent my career writing for other people on television. So I know that, that whole writing thing. And that is one of the things I talk about all the time when I coach and mentor and help people write, is that vulnerability, that true connection, that honesty, that openness with one another. That's what we really crave. That's what makes us digestible. That's what makes people want to open up your book. And to be honest, I have not read your book yet. I've read a chapter or two because you posted something on it the other day, and it really hit home to me how you said you felt so lonely when you saw other people being able to call on people like their family or friends, and you didn't have that connection. And there's some of that truth into what we're talking about, but I think we all do need to also take a little bit of that responsibility back into ourselves and be like, who are we? How do we connect with ourselves? And how do we show up in the world so that we can create these real connections and so that we don't feel alone, even if we're calling on friends or family or others or having this kind of a conversation? And I love that you like to have deep conversations, because that's all I do.
Well, yeah, I mean, the book is extremely vulnerable. And in chapter 2, I talk about the 5 kinds of connection that we need. And so it's not that we have to be vulnerable and deep with everyone. I'm going to walk you through the 5 types. I think it's quite actionable for people. So the first type is self-connection, which we've touched on, that relationship with ourselves. And then we have our intimate connections, which are normally the 5 people you cohabitate with. These are the people you can truly be vulnerable with and still love you. They're the people you can call on to borrow money. They're the people that will save you in a crisis. So you only need 5 of those. And then we have relational connection. This is belonging to a social fabric. So say you need a cup of sugar from your neighbor. You feel you can knock on the door and ask for that cup of sugar. We live in a world now where our modernity has changed the way we use cities and neighborhoods. So people don't really know their neighbors. They don't feel comfortable asking someone, can I borrow your stepladder? I've got to fix something in my bathroom. Like, we no longer live like that. So that's a big one right now. We have collective connection. These are people like you and I. We are not best buddies. We don't tell each other deepest, darkest secrets, but we have an interest in personal development, and that is our commonality. And collective connection is why people became religious many, many eons ago, is they were threaded through by that central thread of religion. Or you can get it in your cycling groups, your crafting groups. So these are people you don't have to be deeply intimate with. You have hobbies that are aligned. And the last one is micro connections. This is the nod to your barista at Starbucks in the morning. These are those oxytocin, dopamine filled, small, positively polarized interactions through the day. And we miss those in the pandemic. My point in giving that quick overview of those, and there's a quiz on simoneheng.com if you want to work out which type you're good at and which type you're lacking, by the way. But why that's really important is I see online and social media a lot, like, if your girlfriend can't have a deep conversation with you, cut it. So maybe that girlfriend is not meant to be part of that 5. Do you have that 5? If you got that 5, then anyone else who comes along might belong to one of the other categories. This whole cutting people off is making us lonelier. I agree wholeheartedly with cutting off toxic connections, people who have a lower opinion of you than you do yourself, or people whose values are not aligned. You know, since I left entertainment, my life has become very deep. I've never been a materialistic person, but being in entertainment augmented any sliver of materialism that I had. And so funny, after I left, I'm back in my thrift shop clothes. I'm back in my DIY. Like, I'm back to who I was as a child. And that inner child is being nurtured. And so recently I did bump into someone from the time that I was in the media, and he came to my home and he made me feel really bad about me, not because he was trying to be mean, but because his value system is still all around models and money. And if you're not a woman who's a model, you have no value really, and like how he was talking. And his values not aligning with mine made me feel more lonely. And so I've made the decision that I won't be catching up with him again. But, you know, he couldn't care 2 cents that I've written an international book in the time that I haven't seen him since the pandemic. Like, he could not care less. Like, he's not interested in what I post. Like, it's a different value system. And that can make us feel more lonely. So if you're looking around at your friends and when you leave each other, you feel a little bit dirty inside. You feel like that interaction was a bit dirty. Like, I don't feel uplifted or seen. I feel worse about me than when I went into that interaction. It's probably a disconnect of values. And you need to really ask yourself, maybe that person then moves down to just a micro connection. So maybe I would see him at an event or somebody's birthday here and we would just acknowledge each other. It doesn't mean I have beef or I don't like him, but I don't want to spend the rest of, I'm going to be 40 next year. I don't want to spend the rest of my life around people that make me feel more lonely when we're in a global loneliness epidemic. So, you know, making those choices are important.
Well, it sounds like I mean, it sounds like, in that instance, he wasn't seeing you. He wasn't seeing you for your growth. And I think that's where a lot of this comes in, is that we are meant to grow. We are meant to change. We are meant to evolve. And let's hope those 5 people in your inner circle that you can call on accept that growth and will grow with you. But that always isn't the case. So we do have to, I think, one, have compassion for others and give each other grace that we are all growing at different times and in different ways. But we have to also understand that we may outgrow a relationship. So like you said, he might be that in that micro relationship versus that, that core 5 that
Yeah.
you have.
That relational, yeah. And I think it's how we phrase those things versus some of the tiles that I see on Instagram that really worry me, which is quite harsh. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people can be right for you at different times. And the wonderful thing about getting older is you have that acceptance of letting people move through those types of connection. And that doesn't mean you have beef. You just have evolved differently.
1,000%. But I also like when you were talking and explaining it, some of those different things, it's like you came back to who you were as a child. And I think that is huge in connection and getting to know who we are. Like, we lose that childlike wonderment of ourselves. We lose that joy as we get older, whether it's societal or whatever it is, or we grow up and feel like we have to be responsible. But then when we can come back to that, that's when I feel like we really start to truly connect with who we truly are. And that's when we can start showing up in the world and create those relationships that we want to create moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things my therapist has always said to me is, you know, prioritize Simone, the inner child, the little baby Simone, and what is good for her and what makes her feel safe. And so I think when we come back to ourselves and we start doing things that gave us as joy as a child, it not only helps to keep a little version of us safe, it also helps us to revisit who we might have been before the world got in the way. Who was I before the media industry told me to focus all of my attention on being as skinny and as young as possible? And the fact is, the girl before that was a massive nerd who could write a 10,000 word essay in like 3 hours, who loved to paint and do things with her hands. And it's so weird as a 40-year-old, but so wonderful to return to that and read books and do all those things and to realize how comfortable and safe it makes me and how joyful it makes me. So when in doubt, when you're at that point, and we all, I think, Courtney, you'll agree, we all go through these inflection points in life where we go, I don't like my status quo. I want to move and transform to something else. And there's this horrible in-between period where you're letting go of the former self. I mean, I'm writing this stuff now, so it's really top of mind. But you're letting go of the former self, you're gripping the new self. And there's this really uncomfortable moment in the middle. I would suggest for people during that uncomfortable moment, instead of backsliding into the former version of you, jump into all the hobbies and things that gave you joy as a kid, walking in nature, playing with your dog, crafting, whatever it is. And that will keep you safe as you're trying to stay focused on the new transformative version. And I think that I wish somebody had told me that when I was going through that in 2018.
Well, I think that's what we call the liminal space. And I've talked a lot about this, going through that transition. It's an uncomfortable time. It's like you don't even know yourself. So like you don't even know how you want to show up and you're still trying to figure that out. And I think one of the best tools for that is the things that you're talking about, that creativity. When we get creative, we connect, we own. And I have young kids, so I watch them. They are so just ultimately, they're just connected. They know what they want when they want it. And they don't have that filter that we do as adults by questioning every move. So then when we can get dirty and we can, paint or get to crafting or, like me, I love puzzles. Like if I sit down on the floor and do a puzzle with my daughter, I feel energized. Like I know I'm that nerdy girl too. It's like, I love it. But when we do that, that brings us back to, I love how you're calling it, that sense of safety, that like almost cocoon, that we are okay and we will make it through this period, because that liminal space, that change space, we don't really know how long it's going to take for us to metamorphosis into this new version of ourselves.
I mean, I think it took me a good 3 to 4 years before it was solidified, like the backsliding was done. And then now I would see, me on that stage at Harvard recently speaking at the Social Connection conference. And I watched the video of me speaking back, and I was like catching up to myself. I was like, who is this girl? Because, from being in media, prior to the pandemic and when I was in media, I was used to constantly being videoed. And then we just had 2.5 years where no one else videoed me except for me, and I was controlling the angle and what I was wearing and everything. And now here's this woman on stage. The girl in me had left the building, but I don't at all mind the woman that was left in her space. Like, who that new version is was so empowered. I don't think I've seen a woman that ethnically looks like me that speaks with that level of intensity. And I embraced her, but it was weird. It was like, oh, I haven't seen me for half a decade on camera, and now I look like my mum. But my mind and my articulation and my ideas and my concepts are more brilliant than they've ever been. And I had to mourn a little bit, like the girl's gone, like the Hervé leisure dress wearing girl has gone. That's okay too, because you wanted to be here for so long. You wanted to have credibility and people take you seriously and lead with the mind. And now you're here, and you've also, I think, acceptance once you're through the liminal space is also really important too, is accepting, okay, we're here now and this is where we live. But you've just given me the hugest gift by talking about how children are so fluidly connected without question. And one of the things I'm currently facing, just to be vulnerable, is I'm very good with my platonic friendships, Courtney, and really worked hard at them because they are the family I didn't have. But I spent all of this last year researching for this second book and researching non-platonic relationships to help with my own dating life. 39-year-old single woman in Asia, which has its own dating inequality issues. And I have analysis paralysis. So I go on a date, and now because I know all this stuff, instead of being connected like that child, like what feels good, what feels comfortable, what do I like, what do I not like, and that's okay. It is literally like, well, you now know this about attachment style, and maybe you think this guy's boring because you're anxiously attached, but actually maybe he's not boring. With children, don't have that. They're purely connected to what Freud calls the id, right? So it's what they desire is what they express, and it's completely synchronistic. And now maybe if I do go on any more dates before the end of this year, I will try and think of you and your kids and just go, okay, what a child. Like, all of this self-learning about the dating has also created kind of a paralysis and milked the magic joy out of the dating. And so I think, thank you for the gift of that. I'm going to remember that as a mental prompt when I go on a date. Like, what would the childlike part of you want to do right now, instead of analyzing the hell out of every single thing this man does?
Well, I love that, because I wonder, you are an intellectual person. You're a connected person. So many times we allow our mind to get in the way of something good. And when it comes to connection, I think there's something to be said about like the different types that you're talking about, but there also has to be something said about the energy, that spark, that je ne sais quoi, we don't know what it is. And I think that's what a child does. That's what a child knows. I've told this story on the podcast before. My daughter over the summer, she goes to a preschool, and there was like a little church camp, and that she went to for just a couple days. She's only 4. And during the camp, she just did not want to go see this like speaker. There was this science man that came to the show, and the teachers pulled me aside later and said, does she not like older people? I'm like, no, she's fine with older people. But that girl is such a strong, good read. She has such a read of someone's energy. She'll tell you in a second if she wants to talk to you or not, if she wants to be in your presence or not. Something about this person was off-putting. Now, I don't know if there's a reason to worry or not. I mean, I haven't heard anything. But the fact that the teachers listened to her, I was like so beyond happy and proud, and that she spoke up and that she was respected in that. But that's what kids can do. Kids don't have that filter of their mind to analyze every situation. And so they can read an energy. They can read that pull. We are magnetized towards people that don't make sense for us. I mean, when
Yeah,
I
because
was
of our
in your
trauma and things
position,
like that.
1,000%. Yeah. I was in your position. I had my daughter at 37. I had my son at 39. Like I'm 41 now, like I didn't think I was ever going to find my person because I was doing all the rules. I was trying to make those connections the way that you're supposed to. But you can't curate that. You also have to allow a connection to unfold the way it is. And energy doesn't lie.
Yeah, and connection is primal, right? It was created when we were living as early Homo sapiens in tribal communities, and it was safe. Our brain wired safety in numbers. I'm going to survive if I'm with people, and so it's wired into us physiologically. That's why loneliness. When we're lonely, we have a fight or flight response because it's a biological response to the perception that we're under threat, that we're separated from the tribe, and we're going to be picked off. And so, what a child does, and even my puppies do, children and animals have an immediate sense of what is safe for me, what is not safe for me. And it's amazing that the caregivers in your daughter's situation listen, because in our generation, and I write about this extensively in my book, we were given our parents' boundaries. So as an Asian woman, this is an uncle. I might not have liked that uncle. He was a bit creepy. I had to go kiss the uncle, told to allow aunties that I barely knew. They were not aunties by blood. They're just in our community. We just call family friends aunties. I was made to have to give my cheek to them to let them kiss me, even if I didn't like their smell or I didn't. And we know now, sensually, if you don't like someone's smell, it's for a reason. It's wired into us to keep us safe. Like, that's not a good match for you. And so I just think of so many times where our boundaries were not heard. And I think what a wonderful gift that the people taking care of your daughter and you and your girlfriends, when they're helping to babysit your kids and their kids all together, are mindful, self-connected, and enforcing these boundaries, because we didn't have that. And frankly, I've only just stopped being traumatized at 39 about some of these things where I had firm boundaries and they were muted by not just my direct family, but my extended family, the Asian community in general. And so I think that's probably the most, I guess they would perceive as Western thing about me, but it's the most, my number one thing is keeping little Simone safe, and by extension, keeping my nieces and nephews, their little versions of them safe, because I'm everyone's auntie. And I don't want that to happen to them. If they don't want to give someone a kiss on the cheek, if they think someone's creepy, if the cinema scares them, we don't go. That's okay. I'm not like, what is your boundary, little person? Like, that's how we should do it. And so I love that. And I love that they listened to your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. But what it is it's our intuition. We become so disconnected from that inner self, from our spirit, from our intuition. And there's so much to be learned and understood when we can reconnect to that, because that's what happens. Our children that are so connected to that, and as they grow, we stop them from, relying on it. But you also said something when you were talking about the little children in the community, like having a sense of faith. People would go to church for that I forget the names of the 5 different things. People would go to church for the community. But at the same time, we don't do that now. And I don't know if it's a Western culture thing or not. It's like church is a facade. And I'm not saying you have to be religious. I'm saying for the community and having faith in something bigger. We've lost that in the Western culture. It's not a way of life. And I think that is also a missing link in our connection.
Absolutely. So if we look at how towns used to be planned, it was always around the central piazza, the mosque, the synagogue, the church, right? The whole community, after Sunday service or Friday service, whatever religion you follow, you'd have food. Maybe there'd be a marketplace. I really use the movie Chocolat as a great example of this. So after service, they would all be, and we don't plan our cities that way anymore. We don't live like that anymore. And that is part of when the US Surgeon General talks about loneliness, like the conditions of modernity. One of the things that he suggests, not just for the US, but for globally, is we have to reimagine our spaces, how we are using spaces, because what happened in the last 20 years is we no longer plan our cities that way. So we demolish and we are living siloed in little cubicles or little suburbs. And we're not meeting centrally at one central time. We live on demand, right? We watch Netflix on demand. We go on apps and date on demand. We do everything for our own convenience on demand. We even follow our GPS when we walk on demand, which means those serendipitous, coincidental, intuitive connections where you would meet the love of your life by accident at a church picnic or at someone's family gathering, the probability of that happening is reduced a lot. That is contributing also to loneliness, for sure.
So do you think there's a way out of the loneliness epidemic?
Yeah, for me, the antidote to loneliness is connection. And there are so many things that we can do to facilitate this. Firstly, we already mentioned one is like, can we be less ruthless about canceling people? And this also goes with the extended conversation about the left versus the right and this whole extreme canceling of people that is contributing to polarization, right? So if we start to see other people, like if I start to see Courtney as you're white American and Courtney sees me as Simone is Asian Australian, and we see that first before we see each other's humanity, this is not helping us. And yes, it's a big issue in the Western democracies, but it's also it's a global issue, is seeing the differences before the commonalities. So that's one that I would like to suggest to people. That compassion, like let's not cut people off without really connecting to self and processing that, because in a loneliness epidemic, your connections are more valuable than ever. So if you've got connections and you're cutting people off based off very petty things, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of that coincidental new friends coming in the way that we used to. I think we also, and I think there's big rhetoric around this in the US, but maybe not so much the rest of the world. But this idea of vulnerability, this disclosure is vital, particularly for male connections, into fighting the loneliness epidemic. So I say in the book, nothing augments shame like silence. So if you feel shame for being lonely and then you're silent about it, it's just going to get worse. So saying, I feel a little lonely. And then lastly, understand that the lonely brain is not rational. Literally, when someone is chronically lonely for months at a time, rewires it so that that person self-isolates, even though the one thing that they need is to go out and socialize. So I have a bit of a TikTok following, and I read the comments from Gen Z, and those comments are always around, I don't need human connection. I just need Wi-Fi connection. I'm an introvert. Like everyone thinks they're an introvert now. Are you an introvert, or has the lonely brain told you that you don't need people and people are not to be trusted? You should self-isolate. We know the lonely brain is hypervigilant for the perception of social threat, which means you're hypersensitive to every small slight, like your friend canceling last minute because they're sick. When you're lonely, that takes on different meaning. Abandonment. People aren't to be trusted. So part of my work is getting these facts out there so people can connect to self and go, am I really not wanting to go out because I just need some time to myself, some self-care time? Or am I not going out because my lonely brain is irrationally telling me to self-isolate, even though what I really need, if I look at my real heart's desire and connect to self, what I really need is to see some people with whom I feel safe. That part's really important. If you're lonely and you go put yourself in a nightclub, that's going to confirm for you all the bad things you think about humanity. It's going to confirm all your hypervigilance and your emotional sensitivity, and it's just going to make you stay home more. And I've experienced that viscerally after a breakup 1.5 years ago. And I think people who are going through breakups don't go to nightclubs afterwards because you're feeling lonely. Then you're seeing all the bad behavior, and then it's wiring to keep you alone. So my job really, and with what I do on socials, is to get these facts out there. I feel if we are armed with the mind, in addition to our intuition, our heart, and our spirituality, we have that rounded picture of what's happening with us. We can make much better decisions.
It almost sounds like it's almost like the metaphor for your dating is how you're like, we overanalyze it, we overthink it, we overcomplicate it with our mind in any sort of lonely situation. And I don't know if it's like I guess it is. You said we're kind of wired to think that way. But if we can simplify it by like finding a safe person to have a conversation with, or go for a walk in nature so you can have that serendipitous connection, those things, it's like we don't need to think of the 5,000 reasons why that person might have canceled. Maybe they have a stomach ache and they don't want to tell you, like there's so many different reasons why someone, doesn't necessarily need to like give you all the information, but I'm right there with you. Like, I'm always like, what are they thinking? Oh, they canceled. They hate me. They must not like me. They don't ever want to talk to me again.
Well, they're not a
go
good friend.
there.
I completely agree. And I think it's, if you're listening and you're like, I don't even have people I can go to, a great filter for safety is people with similar values and people with commonalities. Because remember when we were evolving as early Homo sapiens in tribes, our tribes people looked like us, moved like us, spoke the same language as us, and probably had a lot of the same customs or values as us. So I'm not saying only hang out with people who look like you. That's not what I'm saying at all. But maybe they're similar age, they have similar hobbies. Maybe you both volunteer, and that's a big part of your life. When you're lonely and hypervigilant, you want to be making that first connection outreach as safe as possible for you, so it leaves a great impression. So then you want to make more connection after that. And I did that recently. I went to a craft class. I went to an embroidery class, and I really just wanted to learn how to do this. I'd seen the girl's stuff on Instagram, and she's like an artist. It's not like your granny's embroidery. It's some really cool hipster shiz. It was really cool. And I wanted to know, and it was like $50 subsidized by the government at this like festival, like a fair, you'd say in the US. Here it was more like, a festival. And so I went, and immediately I felt so safe, because the type of women that are attracted to the commonality of doing embroidery are not bitchy. They're not there judging you. I mean, one was a nurse and one was a social worker. And I thought, Simone, how funny. You want to find women that have good hearts to be your friends. I already have many, but I mean, we can never have more in the epidemic of loneliness, right? This is a fantastic place to find them. It's not at your media events that you get invited to, where maybe people physically are dressing like you, but inside there's stuff going on. Maybe the book clubs, maybe the hobbies you loved as a child is where to find the people with the alignment of your heart. And I think go for the heart. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that is so huge, because like we said at the beginning, or like I was saying at the beginning, I think a lot of the times we aren't connected to ourselves. We don't even know ourselves. So we don't know where those connections are going to happen. So it's like by trial and error. Think back to the things that you did as a child. It's like, like I said, I love puzzles and mysteries. I need to join like some puzzle mystery club, It sounds dorky, but we are so...
I know you're busy, but when they get older, something to think about.
Seriously. But at the same time, it's like we do worry, like you said, what we can go to the media event and think we're going to connect, but everyone is putting up a facade. We are living in such a world of facade. We have to break past that. So we have to get out of our own way to experience and experiment, so that we can find what really makes brings us back to our heart. Mm-hmm.
Be playful, exactly where you said experiment. When I think of that, I just think when you're a child and you play, and you have just done me, I'm almost on the edge of tears, Courtney. I needed this conversation today, because in regards to the dating, I'm not playful at all. I'm like, I'm 39, I'm freezing the eggs. I've read all the dating books. You're not a fit. Bye. And I am so good with my family and my friends, but you really reminded me that play is important, and that play is also very attractive to other humans, be they potential suitors or be they potential friends. People want to be around playful, joyful people. No one wants to be around the person that's like, I've opened my calendar. We have a calendar invite to meet today. And we're going to, and there is a propensity when you live in cities like Singapore that are super busy, to live like that. And thank you for reminding me. Thank you.
I just have this feeling that you're going to go on a trip somewhere and meet someone unexpected, because I understand you so much because I was there. I was at the point where it was like, okay, I want to be a mom. I am just going to have a baby on my own. I can do this. I have everything taken care of. I'm giving myself 6 months to find my person. And you know what? I put myself on every dating app and I never said no. Never once said no. I just went out with people. And, I had so many friends who would they would go down that list and they would be like, okay, you didn't go to school here. You don't have a college degree. Oh, this is what you do. Like, I threw out all of the rules. I threw out all logic and went on this just book. I double booked myself to the point where I had to cancel so many dates when I met my husband because he was the one. It didn't take that long, but when you open yourself up to possibilities, and that's what any kind of a connection, romantic, friendship, anything, when we open ourselves up to what can come in, who knows? You may be surprised and find the love of your life, the person that you've been needing to fill that space. You never know.
Did you meet him on a dating app, or did you meet him serendipitous?
No,
wow.
We met on a dating app. We met on Bumble.
Singapore's a bit interesting, and I'll take that offline with you and explain to you later, Courtney. But I can't at my end. I can't even get a date here. No one even asks you to go on a date. But I'm about to go to Australia to see my mother, and I may just take your advice and change my geography on that app after we get off this call and see. And be playful about it, not be like, oh, this has to be a date for whatever reason. Yeah.
But the thing is, with any connection, I mean, if you are connected to yourself, if you know yourself, I will say you will know immediately. So it's not like you have to give everyone that chance. It's like, okay, you go have drinks, you know that it's going to be a drink, but you know how to connect with someone, you know how to have a conversation. So I'd say just take the pressure off of it and have fun with it, because that's what allows us to really show up as our most authentic self and allows us to make those real connections, even if it's just one conversation. Who cares?
Oh,
maybe you're bringing something to the table that person needs.
You're 1,000,000% right. And I have met, in the last almost 2 years of being single, I have met so many people who have become friends. And I think that that's been really lovely. That's been really lovely as well.
But I think it is important to have all those relationships. I know some people walk around saying, oh, I don't want to be in a relationship, or I don't want to be committed in that way. I actually don't think that's true. I think we all yearn for it. I think we all yearn for that love and that connection in some way, shape, or form in our life. And I'm not saying that that's what completes us. I think it's something that is a desire that most of us have.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely, when I see Gen Zs say that they don't need human connection, or people say I'm introverted and lockdown's fine for me, I don't need connection. I'm like, that's not what the science says. We all need human connection on a different spectrum. Some of us need less than others, but we still need it. And so it's an absolute joke-ola to say that you don't need it, you don't crave it. And we know with attachment styles, for example, people who are avoidant in their relationships deeply yearn for connection the same way as secure and anxious types, but it manifests in them because of their own issues as, I have a fear of intimacy, and you're suffocating me. But the underlying child, pre-being damaged or traumatized in some way, still yearning for love and connection. So we're all born into this world needing human connection as a basic human need, along with food, water, shelter, okay? And we need love and connection to build our self-esteem, and only when we've built our self-esteem can we be the best version of ourselves. So loneliness is not just a mental health issue, it's a physiological, it's a physical well-being issue as well. So we absolutely need it.
Well, you would probably know better than me, but I believe I read a study somewhere saying that we need like 12 hugs a day or something. Like, you need that human connection, that physical human connection to regulate our nervous system or to feel fully connected throughout our day. Is that accurate? I mean, I don't know if you know about that or not, but I think I read it.
Yeah, the one that I know the most is famous study by Dr. James Cone, who I interviewed for the book. And he basically took two groups of people, one group of people who were in a high quality relationship, came in with their spouses, held hands, and in their other hand, they were given an electric shock. And then they took another group of people that were holding hands with a less higher quality relationship. And then they had another control group who held the hand of just a caregiver, like a nurse and someone that they didn't know. And what they found was the people in the high quality relationship who were getting electric shocked, the pain receptors in their brain did not light up as much. So the physical human connection, that physical touch, diminishes our perception of pain, which is why I know when I go visit my mum in Australia in that nursing home, it's my specific hand that helps to improve her resistance to discomfort versus just anybody's hand. And so we know being supported physically diminishes pain. Also, Julianne Holt-Lunstad, who I was just speaking on the same stage as at Harvard, she's endorsed my book. She is the person that came up with a statistic that loneliness is more dangerous than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And her work is fascinating about how loneliness damages the immunity in the body, because of course it is a fight or flight response. So if you feel lonely chronically, you have those cortisones, that stress hormones just cycling over and over again in your body, and they lead to a whole host of life-shortening diseases that affect us physically. So loneliness, this is not just a mental health issue. This is a physiological, this is a body issue as well.
Well, it sounds like that leads to things like anxiety and depression, which depression doesn't shock me, but like things like anxiety can stem from that, because if you're in that constant state of fight or flight, your nervous system has to be wrecked.
Yes, absolutely. So loneliness is the petri dish for depression, anxiety, rage. My mother has hoarding disorder. Hoarding disorder also, I feel, is very linked to loneliness as well. So it's just bad news bears for the fact that, 1 in 3 Americans are lonely or say that they've been lonely. Like, the statistics just keep coming on this. I don't think at all that the pandemic helped us. But I absolutely need as many people as possible. We need as many people as possible to shout from the rooftops about this. Because if we survive the climate crisis, as a species, for me, the connection crisis will be the next thing that existential crisis that we deal with, because we're going to have also AI coming into play. So people are going to be connecting with AI. So all of this is in the book in real depth. If any of this is like triggering people's interest, I go real deep, and a lot of memoir in this as well, a lot of autobiography that's like reading a movie. So don't think it's a boring sciencey book.
Well, but how do we combat that with, like you're saying, all these Gen Zs are just kind of like, no, I'm good. I don't need that connection. I mean, that's who's coming up behind us. Like, our generation is already, dealing with it in our own way. But like, that sounds like even a further extreme. Like, how do we change that so that they can get out of their own way? Because that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So we firstly have to model behavior with our technology use. This was the subject of my keynote when I was just at Harvard. It's about their learning to soothe their pain of loneliness, which they are not even old enough, because their prefrontal cortex isn't developed. So they're not even old enough to go, hey, I feel lonely. But they feel the social rejection we all felt as teenagers when we didn't belong in some way. They're soothing that pain with swiping online and engaging on social media. And they're learning that from watching their parents model that when the parent takes them to the park and the parent's bored and disengaged, and then they're like this. And so we have to model the technology use better for them, because we want them to not be swiping away the pain. We want them to identify loneliness. Only if you can identify the state will you go out and connect to try and stop it. And the difference between people like you and I that had an adult childhood and a digital adulthood versus a Gen Z is when the pandemic happened, yes, we all lost our social skills, they atrophied, but just like going to the gym, we worked them back up, right? And we were able to go out and connect. imagine for these young people, 2.5 years of the pandemic, during that critical time where you're an adolescent and you're out there finding out your identity based off the social mirrors of people around you. But they had a completely digital childhood. So you don't have the social tools to get back and reconnect. So in the Signal Loneliness Index in the US in 2018, Gen Z came up as the loneliest of all generations. In Australia, a similar report came out. Gen Z, again, they are lonelier than my mother, who's almost 80, sitting in a nursing home on her own. They are lonelier than that, which just goes to prove the point about my 5 types of connection. You can be surrounded by people and not feel satiated in your connection. You can still feel lonely. Loneliness is the gap between the kind of connection you so deeply crave and the kind of connection that you are getting. And so what we have with Gen Z is, I want acceptance, love, belonging, which is what all human beings do. And what I'm getting is superficial friends who cancel me at the last minute, who talk to me on social media and then bully me later, who we engage online but then don't engage with me face-to-face at school, and I'm confused and I don't know how to make myself feel better because I don't have the social skills to go and make myself feel better. So I'm just going to sit back in front of this video game and keep doing what I'm doing. That I'm scared for what's going to happen.
I wonder, I mean, I hear what you're saying, it being a loneliness epidemic, but it also sounds like it's a major addiction to our devices. That's another part. And a lack of presence, a lack of coming back to what matters and being present. And even as you're saying it, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I need to reverse course with my children. They're very young, but that's the same thing. It's like, it's so easy just to this. Is it loneliness or is it boredom? I mean, because you can just be bored, and it's like, we don't know how to be bored anymore. We don't know how to just sit with our thoughts or like sit here and play with one another. It's like, okay, I find myself sitting at a stoplight. Oh, I got to check my social media. Like, why?
What? Yeah. So this is also such a good point. So I have a whole chapter in here about addiction and loneliness. A lack of connection, according to Dr. Gabor Mate, is a petri dish for addiction. At some point along the way, we weren't soothed and we didn't have the connection we wanted, and therefore addictive behaviors were be social media, workaholism, shopping, eating, whatever it is. And so we have to look at that social media use. For some of us, not all of us, of course, it's a soothing of discomfort. I feel discomfort in sitting alone with myself, so I'm going to put a podcast on. So one of the things that I do to kind of keep me from that is I read in hard copy, not on the Kindle, because I want to deconnect myself from device use, just generally. I want the grounding nature of the how tactile this is to flick these pages to bring me down. And I also paint, and I'm doing the embroidery. We know you get happy hormones from doing things with your hands. It's how human beings are. It's very primal for us. We are no longer doing things with our hands. We are tapping and liking, but we're not doing things with our hands. So these are hobbies that I do so that the phone goes away for hours. If I didn't do those hobbies, I think I would be just checking my phone. I'd be lying watching Netflix. Excuse me. I'd be in what I call the multiple, pixie sneezes. I'd be in what I call the multiple screens dilemma. Like, I'd be lying in bed watching a bad Selena Gomez movie on Netflix while then simultaneously scrolling my social media. Like, what am I? Could I be more disconnected? Why am I lying here? I mean, thank goodness the dog is there, so that's kind of tactile and getting oxytocin from the dog. But I mean, that is a way to be more lonely. Like, at least when I'm painting, I'm connecting to myself. I'm grounding because I'm sensing sensation of the brush stroke in the paint, on the canvas, the noise it makes, the shade, the blending. You're so there. It's almost meditative. And I think we need to be getting back to doing more things like this instead of the scrolling. We're just, and bless their hearts, I speak for almost all the big tech companies about connection. But we know that they are also business, and they also want us to be on those apps. Our attention is money.
Honestly, what it really sounds like is we need to just get back to being human. We're like being too robotic. We need to get back to the basics, the primal basics of being human. That's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So luckily for us, we remember what that was to live for at least about, let's say, 2 decades, people that are our age, of not having a smartphone. They weren't bad years. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of stuff that I'm really glad I have in my life now. I learned a lot of hobbies. I played a lot of games. I connected over movie nights with girlfriends and popcorn. Funny thing is, my 40th birthday next year, I want to do that. I want to just rent a local cinema and get the popcorn out and have all the girls have a big girls' pajama party, because once again, you know, we live in this world like, oh, let's do a photo wall, Instagram, balloons for your birthday, this, that. It's like, well, no, that doesn't make me more human. That is presenting a party to be photographed. I want to connect deeply, authentically, and to the heart of myself with my chosen family. So no, I don't think I want to rent a bar and bring in a bunch of balloons and a photo wall so that other people can have social media envy about my birthday. It is absolutely all going back to being human. And our dilemma is reminding a generation that doesn't remember that of how to do that. They never had it. How do we remind them of something they never had?
What a big thing to take on, because like you said, there's so many great things that we had in our childhood that we didn't, we can actually still remember. Like, thank God we didn't have social media and some of these things when we were in high school or college, like life would have been so different. And I'm just so thankful we didn't. And I feel bad for kids now that have to navigate that, because it is hard. So like, if we can just model for them how to be human, we are all going to be better off as we get older.
I think of how traumatizing some of the bitchiness and bullying at the beginning of high school when you're about 13 was. And then I think, imagine the mobile phone to capture that, to have people screenshotting bad things, other people saying it. Like, how traumatizing for a 13-year-old who's still a child. How traumatizing for boys to be shown pornography when they're still boys. They're not even men yet, and they might not want to see it, but the ease of sending it to each other is there. Like, how forced into seeing things and growing up. I don't know. I think, wow, like, I love Gen Z for how mature and evolved.
Yeah, and then we also desensitize ourselves by, standing behind that screen and actually not being present for whatever's going on, that bullying or those, we're capturing things behind a camera as if we're not even there. I mean, there's a point where we're not connecting. I mean, we're taking all connection away, all humanness away.
Completely.
But oh my goodness, what great work you're doing. I am so excited to hear that you have a second book on this coming out about connecting to ourselves. So how do we find your first book, and how do we follow along with you and all of the great work you're doing in the world?
Thank you. So my book is Let's Talk About Loneliness. It's in your Barnes and Nobles. It's all over the world in your major bookstores. It's with a wonderful publisher called Hay House. You can find me at Simone Heng on Instagram, Simone Heng Speaker on LinkedIn. I'm super active on those platforms. But if you want to have a direct conversation with me, shooting me an email through simoneheng.com through the contact form is the best way, because it reduces my anxiety, because once it's in my email inbox, I know that I'll never miss replying, versus the social media direct messages, which sometimes I get scared that I'll forget to reply. I reply to everyone. And so sometimes so please, if you want to have a deep conversation, please feel free to drop me an email through simoneheng.com.
Thank you so much for joining me today and having this great conversation, and really just for your work, for spreading the news about this, or the news, for spreading awareness about, this issue, because it really is. And I think we do need more connection. We need more genuine connection. to make everything better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for the work that you do and for having me on. I really appreciate it, Courtney.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Simone Heng, for such a brilliant and enlightening conversation all about connection, connecting to ourselves, connecting to others, and really building those bonds that nourish our soul. If you want to get Simone's book or get in contact with her, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Myers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have going on. Can't wait to talk to you soon. Bye.